We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Tesam and Aleph in Meseches Gittin. This is Gittin Daf 39a. And the previous summit, Rav said that if a person is makdish as Eved, what he means to say is that this Eved should be part of the Am Kadosh. This Eved should be part of the holy nation, meaning that he is essentially freeing his Eved. And the Gemara had asked from a Brisa. The Brisa says on the contrary, if someone is makdish Avdo, all it really means is he's donating the monetary value of the Eved to the Beis HaMikdash. And the Gemara now answers, Hamani Rabbi Meir. This Brisa, which says that really he's just donating the monetary value of the Eved to the Beis HaMikdash, maybe that follows Rabbi Meir. The Amar Ein Adam Motzi Devar V'Levatol. Rabbi Meir says a person doesn't say words for no reason, and that's the sheet of Rabbi Meir. But Ein Achinami, Rav would disagree with Rabbi Meir. This Brisa is just a Das Yochid. And the Gemara says, Hachanam Mistabra, it makes sense to say that this Brisa is Rabbi Meir. To Katani Seifa, because at the end of the very same Brisa, what does it say? It says as follows, V'chein hu shehikdash atzma, that the halach is the same if he's makdish himself. Osav, so he works and the earnings go to him. It's not a problem. Shalo hikdash eladamav, because all he's really made holy, all he's really made hekdash is his monetary value. Yamer b'shlomer Rabbi Meir. If you're going to say correctly that this Brisa is Rabbi Meir shaper, then the sefer the Brisa makes sense. Elo yamer rabbanani, but if you're going to say this Brisa is the rabbanan, b'shloma avdo l'dmei koi, I understand his servant. You can say that was for the monetary value. Elo iu l'dmei koi, but is he standing as far as his monetary value? That wouldn't make sense. It has to be Rabbi Meir. Rashi explains, Hamani Rabbi Meir he Amar Ein Adam Motzi Devarav Lehekdesh Levatola. Rabbi Meir says that when you say words in terms of hekdesh, you're not saying the words for no reason. The Tanya, as we learned in a Brisa, this is where we find this sheet of Rabbi Meir, Hamarich Pachos mi ben Chodesh. Let's say a person takes a child that's less than a month old and gives the Eirech to the Beis HaMikdash. There's a set value depending on the gender and the age. Rabbi Meir says no sin damav. So in that case, where the person or the baby is less than a month old, you give the value of the baby. You don't give the Eirech of the baby because there is no Eirech of a baby. The Adam Yodeh, because everyone knows she'ein Eirech lepachos mi ben Chodesh. There is no set value for a child less than a month old. V'gamar v'yamar l'shem damim. So it must be what he was really saying was, what is the marketplace value? That's what I'm donating to the Beis HaMikdash, the marketplace value of this child. That's Rabbi Meir's shita. Ein adam motzi devar v'levatol. If people know that it doesn't mean one thing, then it certainly is going to mean something else. So Hachanami here also the same thing. Yodeya shein eved roy lo lahakrava v'lo lebinyan. Everybody knows that an eved is not fit to bring as a carbon on the mizbeach. An eved is not fit to build into the Beis HaMikdash, and therefore, what does it mean by hekdesh? V'keven de beloshan hekdesh akdeshe. If he used the language of hekdesh by the eved, gamar bedaito lahakdesh dama v'lomar dama v'alai. What it must mean is the person is saying that the value of the eved, that's what I'm donating to the Beis HaMikdash. That would be Rabbi Meir's shita. And he amred v'shlomer Rabbi Meir here. And then the Gemara said, if you say correctly, this Brisa says Rabbi Meir, v'tayim alav mishum makdish stam sheyakdish limacher. Meaning, if it's Rabbi Meir, it's not that any time somebody says something is hekdish, so that means to say that he's being makdish this item to sell it and use the value. Ela mishum de'ein motzi devarav levatolhu. Rather, what the reason actually is that a person is not going to say something for no reason. Uchim Moshe amar dama v'alai. It's as if he said, I'm donating the monetary value. That's upon me to donate. V'yesh lehen olav mos hainu dechayev laseis damim. So if a person says dam of olai, meaning not going on an eved necessarily, let's say he says his own value is upon me, so then it makes sense he has to give that money. The Adam Yodeh she'ein gufo kadosh. Everybody knows that he's not making himself kadosh. V'yamar l'shem damim, and he's saying it for value. Elo yamer rabbanon. But if you're going to say that this Brisa is not Rabbi Meir, it actually follows the rabbanon, and the point is that it goes against what Rav said. V'tayim mishum demakdish stam davar she'ein roy legufo hikdisho ledamav limacher. In other words, the reason is in general, according to the rabbanon, not like Rav. Anytime somebody is makdish something that itself cannot go on the mizbeach, what it means is he's sanctifying that item, that you're going to sell that item and then give the value to the Beis HaMikdash. If that's really what it means, and again, not like Rav, that the person or the Eved is going free. So b'shalom be'eved ikol memar stamei ledamim kai. So it makes sense by an Eved you could say that's what it means. He's makdish the Eved, that the Eved should be sold, and then you're going to use the value for the Beis HaMikdash. V'achi kamar hareu kadosh limacher. The idea is that it is made holy to sell it. But you can't say that by a person who's not an Eved. Is there not a concept of selling a free man? But what kind of sale could there be? So it can't be the Rabbanan. Ella Rabbi Meir, rather you have to say the Bryce is Rabbi Meir. V'lav demashma milsa lidmei, and not that what he's saying sounds like he's donating the monetary value. Ela mitoch she'eno motzi devarav levatola gamar belivo. What it really means is a person doesn't say words for nothing in terms of hekdesh, and therefore gamar belivo v'yamar demei atzmi olai. What he's actually saying is my value. That's what I'm donating. V'hainu damar hareini hekdesh. That's what he means hareini hekdesh. Shamin osok eved, that we evaluate him as an eved. V'lo yishayimachar, not that you're going to sell him. V'gavi eved nami, the same thing by the eved. Ein rishos hagis bornol. There's no authority of the treasury of the Beis HaMikdash over the Eved. It's just a donation of money. Elamos yesh lahen ala bailim. They can just go to the owners and claim this money. The person is saying he's donating that value. There's nothing that's actually going. There's no kedusha that's actually upon the Eved. And we will add over here that here also in this brisa we see the same pattern in the Gemara that we saw in the previous Amud. The idea is that if the interpretation of the brisa is that the actual Eved is kadosh and you're going to sell the Eved and then give the money to the Beis HaMikdash, that contradicts Rav, because Rav would say that the actual Eved doesn't become kadosh to sell the Eved. Rather, what it means is that the Eved becomes part of the Am Kadosh, becomes part of the holy nation and goes free. But if you reinterpret the brisa and say that all the brisa means is that there is no kedusha on the Eved, and all the brisa means is that the owner of the Eved is obligating himself to donate a certain value, the value of the Eved to the Beis HaMikdash, so that doesn't contradict Rav at all, because then we're reinterpreting the brisa and we're saying there is no kedusha whatsoever that is going on to the Eved. There's no kedusha whatsoever going on to the Eved. That is a different scenario, a different case. In this particular case, because we're following the shita of Rabbi Meir, that Ein Adam Motzi Devar V'Levatola. But in any case, that is a different scenario, and that does not contradict Rav, and that's how the Gemara is getting out of the question in this brisa by saying that we're talking about a situation of lidmei because we're following Rabbi Meir. And the Gemara continues, Leima Ketanoi, let us say that this is a machlokas Tanoim, and Rashi says, Leima Ketanoi Makdish Avdo, Kadosh or Lo Kadosh, if somebody's Makdish is Eved, is the Eved Kadosh or not? And the Gemara brings a brisa, Hamakdish Avdo, if somebody is Makdish is Eved, Ein Moalin Bo, there is no Me'ilah. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer Moalin Besaro. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says that there is Me'ilah in terms of the hair of the Eved. And the Gemara says, "My lav b'hakamiflagi." Aren't they arguing about this exact issue? The Ma'arsav our Kadosh, that the one who says that there is going to be Me'ilah says there is Kedusha on the Eved. Therefore, if you use the Eved for personal use, that is Me'ilah. U'Ma'arsav our Lo Kadosh, and the one that says that there is no Me'ilah holds there is no Kedusha on the Eved. But the Gemara says, "V'tizber," is that logical? Hai moalin bo ve'ein moalin bo. Why are we talking about if there is Me'ilah or there's not Me'ilah? Hai kadosh ve'eino kadosh mi boile. It should say explicitly in the brisa. One opinion should say it's kadosh, and one opinion should say the Eved is not kadosh. Ela dekuli alma kadosh. Rather, you have to say that everybody agrees. On the contrary, there is kedusha by the Eved. V'hacha b'haka miflagi. And here the machlokas is as follows: Demar savar avda k'mekarkoi dami. One says an Eved is considered like land. There is no Me'ilah by land. Umar savar k'metaltali dami. And the other one says that the Eved is considered like metaltalin, like movable property. There is Me'ilah by movable property. But the Gemara says, "Ihachi, if so, ademiflagi besaro." Instead of arguing about the hair of the Eved, liflagu beguva, you should argue about the body of the Eved, argue about the Eved itself, because the whole question is whether the Eved is like land or like metaltalin. And so the Gemara instead says, "Ela rather dekuli alma avda k'mekarkoi dami." Everybody agrees that an Eved is like land. There really should not be Me'ilah. V'hacha besaro ha'omed li gazes k'miflagi. But here we're talking about hair that has reached the length where really it's ready to be cut off. That's the machlokas. Mar savar k'gazes dami. One says it's as if it's already been cut off. It's not considered like land. It's not attached anymore, and therefore there is Me'ilah. Umar savar lav k'gazes dami. And the other one holds it's not like it's been cut off, and therefore it's attached to the Eved. It's considered like land, and there is no Me'ilah. And Rashi says, Mo'alin Besaro, there's Me'ilah by the hair, Dafka Nakat, we're specifically talking about the hair. Again, as the Gemara goes on, it will explain why we're focusing on the hair. Ela dekuli alma kadosh limachir ledamav. The Gemara then ends up saying that all opinions agree that the Eved is kadosh. Again, as we said before, the idea is you sell the Eved, and now the money goes to the Beis HaMikdash. And the whole machlokas is in terms of karka. Rashi explains, ein Me'ilah bekarkos. In general, there's no Me'ilah by karkos. The question is by Eved, if it's like karka or not. The gamrinan Me'ilah chet mitruma. We learn from truma. Ma truma betalash af Me'ilah betalash. Just like truma is by detached from the ground, so too Me'ilah applies to something that's detached from the ground. Kegazes dami, it's like it's already cut. Ve'eno kemechuber lakarka, and it's not as if it is attached to the ground. And the Gemara continues, leima hani tanoi kahani tanoi. Let us say that this machlokas tanoim, whether the hair is considered like it's already detached or not, is the same machlokas tanoim in the following Mishnah. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Rabbi Meir says, Yesh devarim shehem kekarka ve'enon kekarka. There are matters, there are things that are like land, but they're not like land. Ve'en chachamim modim lo, but the chachamim do not admit to Rabbi Meir's position. And the Mishnah now explains, Keitzad, how so? Eser gefanim te'unos masarti loch. Let's say somebody says, 10 vines that are te'unos, that are laden with fruit, I gave you them to watch. V'halo omer, and the person says, Einon el chamesh, you didn't give me 10 to watch, you only gave me 5 to watch. And so this seems to be a case of modav v'mixas, where a person admits partially. In a case of modav v'mixas, you generally swear. Rabbi Meir mechayev, Rabbi Meir says he's chayev to take a shvua. V'chachamim omer, but the chachamim say, kol mechuber lekarka, hareu kekarka, anything that's attached to the ground, like these fruits that are attached to the ground, that has a status of karka, it has a status of land. And in general, the halacha is, ein nishboin ala karkos, you don't make a shvua when it comes to karka. And so over here, you seem to have the same machlokas, and the Gemara further explains. V'yamar Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina says, Anovim ha'omdos libotzer ika beinai. The machlokas here between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim is, you're talking about grapes that are ready to be harvested, and it's similar again to hair that is ready to be cut. The Rabbi Meir savar kibitzuros dam. Rabbi Meir holds that's as if they are harvested, they're considered detached from the ground, it's not considered karka, and that's why there's a shvua, there's an oath. Rabbanan savri lav kibitzuros dam, and the Rabbanan hold that it's not considered like it's harvested, therefore it's attached to the ground, and there's no need to take a shvua. And the Gemara says, Afilu Tamer Rabbi Meir. You could even say that there's a distinction. According to Rabbi Meir, even though Rabbi Meir says the gefanim, the grapes, are considered like it's not attached to the ground, and you take a shvua, but it could be the hair is considered attached. Why? Adkan lo kam Rabbi Meir hasam ela ba'anovim. Rabbi Meir only says his halacha that it's considered detached from the ground by grapes. The kama the kaimin michash kechishi. Because at this point, the longer it stays on the vine, the weaker that it gets. It actually needs to come off of the vine in order to be a good fruit, and therefore at this point Rabbi Meir considers it detached. Avalacha, but over here when it's talking about a situation of hair, the more the hair stays on, the nicer it is, and so therefore just because it is time, so to speak, to cut the hair, there's nothing wrong with the hair staying on the body, and that might be considered to be still attached. And the Gemara continues, Kisalik Rabbi Chia bar Yosef, when Rabbi Chia bar Yosef, when he ascended, meaning to say, when he went to Eretz Yisrael, Amar lahai shmaita de Rav, kami de Rabbi Yochanan. So he said over the teaching of Rav in front of Rabbi Yochanan, meaning he said over the teaching of Rav, that if someone is mafkir his eved, the eved goes free. Amar lei, so Rabbi Yochanan said to him, Amar Rav hachi, did Rav really say that? Does Rav really say, ha-mafkir avdo yatzel lecheirus? But the Gemara now interrupts and says, V'hu lo amar hachi, but the Rabbi Yochanan does not agree with Rav. It's not true. Rabbi Yochanan says the same thing. V'amar ula amar Rabbi Yochanan. But Ula said that Rabbi Yochanan said, Ha-mafkir avdo, yatzel l'cheirus, v'tzarech get shichur. If somebody's mafkir is eved, the eved goes free, and he requires a get, and he requires a document of freedom as well. And so therefore, why is Rabbi Yochanan questioning what Rav says, if Rabbi Yochanan himself said that? And so the Gemara clarifies, Hachi kamerle. This is what he was saying to him. Amar Rav Kavasi, does Rav really say like me? In other words, Rabbi Yochanan did agree with that halacha, but Rabbi Yochanan was surprised that Rav agreed. The Gemara continues, V'ika di'amri, there are those that have the version as follows, Lo saimua kamei, he didn't finish Rav's statement in front of him, meaning he didn't finish the part about the fact that the eved requires to get shichra. So Amar lei, so then Rabbi Yochanan said to him, V'lo Amar Rav tzarech get shichra, does Rav not agree that he requires to get shichra? And in that response, Rabbi Yochanan l'tayim, Rabbi Yochanan follows his opinion that a get shichra is needed. The Amar Ula Amar Rabbi Yochanan, because Ula says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Ha-mafkir avdo yatzel l'cheirus, if somebody's mafkir is eved, the eved goes free, v'tzarech get shichra, but a get shichra is required. And the Gemara continues, Gufa, returning to what we said above, Amar Ula Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Ula says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Ha-mafkir avdo yatzel l'cheirus, if somebody's mafkir is eved, he declares his eved ownerless, that eved goes free, v'tzarech get shichra, but he does require a document to set him free. Only at that point in time he'll be able to marry a Jewish woman. And the Gemara says, Eisvei Rabbi Abba Ula. Rabbi Abba asks Ula the following question from a Brisa. Ger Shemeis, let's say a convert dies. The idea of a convert dying is there's no one to inherit the convert, so all of his property is hefker. It's similar to a case of Hamafkir Avdo. Ubizbizu Yisrael Nechasav. So now Jews, they're plundering his property. It's all hefker. V'hayu ben Avadim, and there are slaves among the property. Ben Gedolim uvein Ketanim. It doesn't matter if they're adult slaves. It doesn't matter if they're minor slaves. Kanu Atzman b'nei Chorin. All of those slaves acquire themselves, and they go free. That's the case of Mafkir Avdo, and they all go free. Abashol says, Gedolim kanu atzman. The ones that are adults, they can acquire themselves. They go free. Kanu atzman b'nei chorin. They acquire themselves as free men. Ketanim, but when it comes to these slaves that are minors, kol hamachzik b'hen, zocha b'hen. Anyone who takes possession of them is zocha. They are not able to take possession of themselves. And so the Gemara now asks, V'chi mi kasav get shichur la'elu. Now who's the one that wrote a get shichur for these slaves? As Rashi says, mi kasav get shichur la'elu, me'ata lahatir be Yisraelis. Now we're saying that these avodim go free, they can marry Jewish women, but there was no document to set them free. Hare mesu bailam. Here you have a situation where the owner died. The owner died, there was no get shichur, there's no one that's able to write this document. So how is it that in this situation they're able to go free, they're able to marry Jewish women? And the Gemara says, Amar Dami Haimi D'Rabbanan Kedelo Gamri Inshi Shmaita. This one of the sages is similar to somebody who's never learned halacha, meaning to say this question that's being asked over here, it doesn't make any sense. In this case, it's obviously different, and a get shichur is not required. And the Gemara says, V'taimamai. So what is the reason? Why is this case different and no get shichur is required? Amar Rav Nachman says, Kasavar Ula holds as follows. Ula was the one responding and saying this case is different. Ula holds as follows. Avdo deger ki ishto, the slave of a convert, is the same thing as his wife. Ma ishto mishtalcha below get. Just like his wife, she would go out without a get. She doesn't need a document if the husband dies. The halach is, if a husband dies, the wife is set free, the wife is able to remarry. Afavodim mishtalchim below get, so too by his slaves, they go without a document, meaning in this case, the reason why it's different, it's not simply a case of mafkir avdo, where he makes his eved hefker, it's a situation where the person died as well. So just like a person's wife goes free when he dies, so too the eved goes free when the person dies. But the Gemara says, Yachi, if so, afilu Yisrael nami, why does it have to be a convert? Any Yisrael who dies who has avodim, the avodim should go free. Just like any Yisrael who dies, the wife is able to remarry someone else. And to that the Gemara says, no, Amar Krotz, because the pasuk says, V'snachaltem osam levnechem acharechem, that the slaves are a nachala, they're an inheritance. So in a normal situation, levnechem acharechem l'reshes achuza, they're like an inheritance. So in a normal situation, where you have someone who has yarshim, so then the avodim go to the yarshim. But in this case, specifically by a ger, there's no yarshim, so the eved goes free. But the Gemara continues, Ihachi, if so, hamafkir avdo v'meis nami. Let's say somebody is mafkir his eved and then he dies, a regular Yisrael, not talking about a convert. He's mafkir his eved and then he dies. The same halacha should be true. There should be no requirement for a get shichror in that situation. But that's not true. Alam Amar Amemar, why did Amemar say, hamafkir avdo v'meis? If somebody's mafkir his eved and he dies, oh, so a eved ein lo takana, for that eved there is no solution. Meaning to say there's no solution because once he made him hefker, so there's no monetary ownership. But you still have this isser over here. He can't marry a Jewish woman without a document, without a get shechor, and now the person died, there is no get shechor. And so the Gemara says to that, Amemar Kashi, you're correct. What Amemar said really does pose a difficulty, because according to what we're saying right now, really mafkir avdo v'meis, the eved should be fine. The eved should go free in terms of any monetary issues, and there should be no problem of isser as well, because the owner has died. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yaakov Baridi, Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yaakov Baridi says that Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, Halacha ka'avashol, the halacha is like avashol. Avashol, again, by the situation of the convert who died, he made a distinction between adult avodim and avodim that are minors. By avodim that are minors, they don't go free, but anyone who takes possession, takes possession. Amar le Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Yaakov Baridi. Rabbi Zera said to Rabbi Yaakov Baridi, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Tes Amud Beis.